Chapter 26. Something's wrong. 1. Ina's agility couldn't be matched by these normal soldiers. A single sweep of her axe took 5 lives at a minimum, sometimes as much as 10. With Lionel's support to her back, she entered the fray without hesitation. She was maybe a little too reckless. Lionel could only watch on with a cold sweat matting his back, throwing out as many spears as he could as quickly as he could. Reaching over toward his barrel, Lionel realized that he had run out. He could only sprint back down and grab another, carrying it up with him. This isn't good. The plan is working almost too well. Lionel threw out another spear, reaping yet another life. A striking problem was becoming obvious to him. The Englishman's first line had been disrupted so thoroughly that even the most forward of them hadn't crossed the third line of defense yet. Because of that, Ina, who had already been their target from the beginning, wasn't receiving the support of the Frenchmen, who stood in a daze as though they were watching the work of gods. Because of the spikes, charging forward now would disrupt their advantage. It was best if they waited at the end of the last line of defense to begin their own slaughter. But since Lionel's trap and Ina's prowess was too overpowering, the enemy was nowhere near reaching that goal. This might sound like a good thing, but Lionel's calculative mind saw that it most definitely wasn't. The way things were going now, Ina would be under too much pressure. He only had one arm to throw with. It was impossible for him to cover her perfectly. Though his high coordination gained him an ambidextrous ability, he needed his left arm to use his shield. Damn it. In the Monday. Archers, take down that man. By now the Englishmen had noticed Lionel's impact on the battle. They could scarcely believe that a man could so accurately throw a spear, and such low-quality ones at that. But they could only accept what was before them. Archers, by their very nature, were located near the back of an army. As such, they were the least affected by the mess at their front line. Unfortunately for the Englishman, trying to scream over the sounds of a battlefield as a normal human was impossible. Medieval armies usually relied on a combination of horn and flag sequences to give orders, but with their general gone, this was easier said than done. By the time the second-in-command finally got hold of the situation and sent down the orders for the appropriate signal, their entire front line was unrecognizable. A ghastly scene of bisected bodies, pools of blood and organs, and men with tears in their eyes painted a terrible hell. Ina, retreat! Unlike the Englishman, Lionel's body was no longer normal. His voice carried a weight that theirs couldn't. But, to Lionel's shock, Ina didn't listen. Lionel's lip twitched. She was always talking about his recklessness, but what was this? Those long bowmen have an effective range of 200 meters at best. There's only about 150 meters between me and them, though. They can definitely hit me from here. Damn it, Ina. Lionel dashed down the siege tower, grabbing another barrel of spears and hoisting it up. Just then a rain of arrows fell toward his direction, but he was already prepared. Lionel had noticed before that Ina's judgment was a bit off. The spear on his back was in fact of the D grade. But this small shield was a C-grade treasure with just one ability. Lionel raised the shield strapped to his left arm above his head. An instant later, its size increased tenfold, forming a massive umbrella in the skies. The clink of the metallic arrows ricocheted off the shield, not leaving even the slightest dent. How could weapons of the 15th century damage a C-grade treasure? Lionel's mind turned rapidly. In that moment, with every clink of an arrow that rebounded from his shield, he drew a picture in his mind, its trajectory, its speed, its acceleration. Every arrow was projected into his mind, drawing a perfect line from its contact point to where the bowman who let it loose was. Lionel locked onto a target. 2 fingers reached down toward his right, plucking a dart out of his metal container. His shield still above his head, he flicked his fingers upward, causing the dart to spin for a brief moment to his side as he ripped his atlatl from his waist. In perfect synchronization, the dart's spin was halted by the appearance of the atlatl, slotting into place as though finding its perfect home. Lionel's left arm swung to the side, swatting the last of the arrows away with his shield. In the same instant, his right arm whipped forward, using the swinging momentum of his left to its advantage to send a silver dart streaking through the air at over 200 kilometers an hour. The targeted bowman never stood a chance. He was the best of his squad, Lionel could tell by the power behind his arrow. But on this day he fell. The pattern continued. Lionel alternated between protecting Ina's back with crude spears and taking out the bowman with his atlatl. He knew that he didn't have enough darts to take out all the bowmen, but he didn't have a choice. Come on, retreat already. Lionel gritted his teeth. Suddenly he felt the siege tower beneath him snap under another rain of arrows. Lionel leaped down before it could tilt to the side. He had already expected this to happen. There were only so many arrow volleys a structure they scrambled to build could take. But this was why Leona had had 3 built. Lionel streaked across the battlefield, making his way to the location of the next siege tower. Even as he used inhuman strength to lift it from its side, the Frenchman and Englishman finally clashed. However, Lionel found it hard to settle his heart. Ina had pretended not to hear him, and she was even deeper into Englishman territory now. Had it not been for them focusing their arrows on him, he didn't know if it would be possible to protect her. With a final roar, Lionel stood the siege tower upright, pulling up one of the barrels he had left in this location up with him. Damn it! What is she thinking? The good news was that even if the Englishmen wanted to ignore him from now on and target Ina, they would only be targeting their own men. The bad news was that this was only because Ina had traveled so deeply into their numbers that she was a small dot amidst a sea of infantry. Lionel frowned. Something's wrong, Chapter 27. Something's wrong. Ina was like a lone blazing star. Despite being alone and surrounded, there seemed to be a perpetual 5-meter radius around her that no one could keep their life within. From afar, it seemed like the Englishman army had split into 3. A single group of archers focusing their might toward Lionel, another attacking the Frenchman, and the final entirely focused on this small woman with a weapon twice the size of her body. However, though Ina seemed invincible, Lionel could see her body heat increasing at an unhealthy pace. Her stamina is running low. Lionel's frown deepened. It had been less than 30 minutes since the battle began, but just how long could a normal human fight under such conditions? Even with her being far beyond a normal human, the load she was facing was several-fold greater as well. Ina, retreat! Lionel shouted once more, putting everything he had into his voice. However, this time, the blaring horns of retreat sounded over him, covering his shouts completely. No, not now. Just minutes ago, there was nothing Lionel could have wanted more. But now Ina had traveled too deeply into their territory. Lionel's arm cocked back and launched forward another crude spear. With a sharp clang, it rebounded and shattered off of Ina's massive axe blade. Ina's head finally snapped backward. But Lionel never got to register just what her expression was. All he could see was the fierce golden glow of her eyes, hiding a flickering redness that seemed to be the depths of a hellish flame. There was only a single thing Lionel could grasp through the almost 100 meters that separated them. Her eyes were almost telling him to piss off. He had seen them like this once before. That day she killed Conrad and stared him down as though she wanted him to witness every moment. He had been too stunned to register just what she was trying to convey to him back then, but now he was certain. She wanted to be left alone. A fiendish red force erupted from Ina's frail body as her killing speed increased explosively. Ina Brazinger. Strength, 150, speed, 0.99, agility, 0.99, coordination, 1, stamina, 0.1, reactions, 1, spirit, 0.1. Lionel's pupils constricted into pinholes. Lionel had never seen stats like this. Even the adjusted stats of the metal invalid paled in comparison. But all his mind could focus on was her stamina. It hadn't gone up. In fact, it had plummeted the instant she began using this strength. Ina's delicate roar overwhelmed the blaring horns of retreat. Her axe whipped around, a force blade extending from its body. However, it didn't sweep outward. Instead, it attached to the blade of the axe, extending its range from almost 3 meters to over 5. It was like the axe was enveloped in the spirit of a larger battle axe, borrowing its power to reap lives. Just the first swing took 20 Englishmen from the world. The second swing took almost 25. The Englishman quaked in fear, but Lionel's anxiety only grew. On the third swing, Ina faltered, and the spirit that enveloped her axe flickered, leaving half the Englishmen destined to die with a new lease on life. It wasn't only this, but they suddenly felt more confident than they had before. Before Ina stood a wall of Englishmen. To her back, the retreating Englishmen barred her in. Lionel didn't even register what he was doing before he found himself falling through the air, having jumped over the railing of his siege tower. Something is wrong, ah. In a flash, Lionel had already burst through the line of Frenchmen who had chosen not to chase. The Englishmen still had more than 16-0 of their original number. It was nothing short of foolish to pursue them with their now less than 1,000 number. However, these weren't things Lionel had the mind to care about. Get out of my way! Kill her! Kill Joan of Arc! The anxiousness in Lionel's heart grew. There was a wall of Englishmen before him, each completely set on Aina Da. They all but ignored him entirely. Aside from a few veterans who were tasked with holding the back line in a retreat, there was nothing. Lionel's jaw set. W1 Without his high vantage point, he couldn't even see Aina in his line of sight anymore. He could only feel the direction of the force she emitted. A part of Lionel wanted to hate these soldiers for standing before him, for blocking his way to Aina. But with a will he didn't know he had, he pressed that hatred down. He had promised himself not to kill in rage. Breathe, Leonela. He spoke to himself, slowly pulling the spear from his back. It felt oddly familiar to him. The black steel that stood cool to his touch, the flat silver blade on its endant had all seemed to balance perfectly in his palm. The body was almost 2 meters in length, the blade at just over 2 feet. It had proportions more like a glaive than a spear, but its glistening point made its true identity clear. 3 flashes pierced forward, ending in holes in 3 English necks. One arm held his shield, the other held his spear, dripping in blood. Lionel took a deep breath, his gaze flickering with a strong blue diamond-like light. Lionel Morales. Strength, 0.8, speed, 0.75, plus 0.1, agility, 0.99 plus 0.1, nullified. Coordination, 1.1, stamina, 0.9, plus 0.05, nullified. Reactions, 1.1. Spirit, 0.4.